March Madness is known for its stunning upsets, but did you know that the college baseball postseason is even crazier? Hello, I'm the college sports superfan, and today we will be going over a few of the craziest College World Series runs of all time, as we are in the month of May and the postseason in college baseball is quickly approaching. First, here are some quick facts about the college baseball tournament. The first ever College World Series was held in Kalamazoo, Michigan in 1947, but has been held in Omaha, Nebraska ever since 1950, meaning that this year will be the 75th year anniversary of the College World Series in Omaha. Since 1999, the field has been expanded to 64 teams. So since 1999 to now, we have been what is known as the Super Regional era in the College World Series. And since 2018, there was a minor change to recognize 16 national seeds instead of 8 nationally recognized seeds before 2018. Another weird fact is that Coastal Carolina won the 2016 national championship as a member of the Big South Conference, but less than 24 hours later joined the Sun Belt Conference. Technically, the Big South Conference can still claim this as a national title for their conference, and this is the only national title that this conference can claim. The USC Trojans have the most titles with 12 national championships thanks to a stretch of dominance in the 1970s where they won 5 national championships in a row. LSU is currently in second place with 7 national championships. And the last interesting fact is that Texas has the most appearances to the Final 8, technically the start of the College World Series in Omaha, with 38 appearances. The Miami Hurricanes are currently in second place with 25 appearances. And as of the time I'm making and recording this video, Texas baseball is currently number 1 in the country, meaning that they'll have a really good chance to make it 39 appearances this season. Fresno State made an insane tournament run in 2008, as the Bulldogs ended up being the 4 seed in their regional out of 4. Fresno State was all over the place during the regular season, as they had a great end of March that included a 6-game winning streak, but had a rough end of April that led to an up-and-down May to end the regular season. Still though, this Fresno State Bulldogs team was ranked number 21 to start the season, and would have 5 players that would go on to be drafted into the MLB in the offseason. So this team, despite some struggles, did have some talent and did have some hope. As a result, they dominated the WAC tournament. But even after dominating and winning the WAC tournament championship, they were only granted a 4 seed out of 4 in the Long Beach Regional. Now it was time to put the regular season, the up and down, turbulent regular season behind them and begin as an extremely low seed in the postseason. So how would they do? Well, they upset Long Beach State right off the bat and then faced off against San Diego State. In Game 2 against the Aztecs, they got blown out badly, losing 15-1 to San Diego State. All hope seemed lost, but this Fresno team found a way to bounce back and win Game 3 5-1 to advance to the Super Regionals. That alone was an impressive feat, anytime a 4 seed ends up winning their regional, that is. But surely they would be no match for Arizona State. Nobody was giving the Bulldogs a chance against the Sun Devils, especially after ASU won Game 1 12-4. Surely Arizona State and their offense was just too much for Fresno State to handle. However, that's when the Bulldogs became the Wonder Dogs. Fresno State had a crazy 2 games, winning 8-6 in Game 2 and then 12-9 in Game 3 to upset and stun Arizona State and make it to Omaha for the College World Series. When Fresno made it to Omaha, they were given the lowest odds to win the national championship. They got off to a hot start as they crushed the Rice Owls 17-5. And yes, in other sports, Rice is not very good, but baseball Rice was actually a powerhouse around this time. Then they went up against University of North Carolina and won a nail-biter 5-3. Starting out 2-0 gives you a very high chance to end up winning the World Series, as you'll see as a theme throughout this video, because starting out 2-0 in the Final 8 allows you to avoid the losers bracket. Keep in mind, it's not quite like March Madness where it's one and done. You have to beat a team 2 out of 3 times. So then they ended up facing North Carolina again, and this time the Tar Heels beat them 4-3. Maybe UNC had figured out how to take down the less talented Fresno State Bulldogs. However, since UNC was coming out of the losers bracket, they had to beat Fresno twice. And unfortunately for the Heels, they lost to the Wonder Dogs 6-1, meaning that Fresno State went from 4 seed in their regional all the way to the national championship. But who would they end up facing in the national title? The number 2 ranked team in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs. Definitely were considered to be the much better of the 2 Bulldogs teams. This Georgia team was heavily favored. Obviously, they were number 2 in the country. They handled their regional. They took down number 15 NC State easily in their super regional. They, in general, had very little trouble throughout the College World Series tournament as well. They had 4 pitchers on this rotation that would end up getting drafted in the offseason into the MLB, including one that was the number 20 overall pick. Plus, they had a great player named Gordon Beckham who would end up being the number 8 overall pick for the Chicago White Sox, and he was playing at shortstop. Not only that, but Georgia took Game 1 in a close 7-6 thriller. It seemed like there was just too much of a talent gap for Fresno State to really compete. However, Game 2 and Game 3 were magical. Fresno won Game 2 19-10. Not really sure where this great pitching that Georgia had went in that game. And then that set up the rubber match. Game 3. Would Fresno State become one of the lowest seeded teams ever to win a national championship? Yes, they can, as they took down Georgia 6-1, and the 2008 Fresno State Bulldogs became the Wonder Dogs, one of the unlikeliest national champions of all of college sports. But believe it or not, there was a team with fewer wins than this Fresno State team that went on to win it all. The 2015 Virginia Cavaliers had the least amount of total wins of any College World Series champion. Their 44 wins as a team is 3 less than the Fresno State team we just described. The Cavaliers were coming off of a great 2014 season where they ended up being the runner-up in the national championship, losing to Vanderbilt. More on them later. So there were some big expectations for this 2015 squad. But then, of course, they had a rough regular season, going just 15-15 in what was a fairly difficult ACC. In fact, out of the 7 ACC teams that made it to the postseason, Virginia had the lowest winning percentage. Also, they only just barely got to the tournament and just barely got to that winning percentage after winning 6 of their last 7 games, which included a series win over Duke and then a sweep over North Carolina just to get to 500. Virginia would end up starting out ACC tournament play strong by crushing Georgia Tech in the play-in game, but would then lose 3 straight games to Miami, Notre Dame, and NC State, and they would get dominated in each of them. The team was riddled with injuries and was humbled badly in their tournament, and they were just hoping for a chance to make it to the NCAA tournament. Fortunately for Virginia, they did get selected, but unfortunately, they had to travel way out west to California, around 2,500 miles away from Charlottesville, and they had to play against all local California teams for their regional. They find a way to battle against the road environment and find a way to get to a super regional. Well, despite all the bad luck that had come across this University of Virginia team this season, they finally were starting to see some good fortunes turn their way, as the top seed in that regional was taken down, so all they had to do was beat the 2 seed USC twice and the 4 seed San Diego State. And they did exactly that. They beat USC, then took down San Diego State, but then they would have to face off against the USC Trojans once again, and that second game against USC was an insane 11-inning, 14-11 victory for Virginia, for them to go 3-0 and win the regional. Fortunately, also for Virginia, there was more good news, is that Maryland also got a big upset in their regional. And since Virginia was in the slightly higher ranked regional, they were the ones that got to host the super regional. I know, somewhat confusing, but at the end of the day, Virginia was able to host Maryland in the super regional, so they got to go all the way back home. However, taking on Maryland was not easy. Virginia beat Maryland 5-3 in Game 1 and then 5-4 in Game 2. Therefore, Virginia was able to win the Super Regional at home in those 2 tight ones and get to the College World Series in Omaha. But even though they were heading to the College World Series, they were the lowest ranked team heading into that 8-team field. Would they continue to be able to battle the odds despite the injuries and all the bad luck they had throughout the season in order to still end up getting back to the national championship game? Well, despite the rankings, they defeated number 7 Arkansas 5-3, and then their pitching and defense showed up once again as they defeated number 2 Florida 1-0. Once again, as you're seeing, the team starting out in 2-0 in College World Series play means that you're typically in pretty good shape. But then they played Florida once again and lost 10-5, but the Gators had to beat the Cavs twice, and it came down to a Game 3 rubber match thriller between Florida and Virginia. Virginia showed once again their resilience and won the game 5-4. Virginia at this point had been battle-tested, multiple comeback wins, and they find themselves in the national championship against Vanderbilt again for the second straight season. Despite all the odds, Vandy and Virginia would play each other for the second straight year. Last year, they played a thrilling 3-game championship that saw the Commodores win their first ever national championship. Once again, Vanderbilt was feeling pretty confident that they would be able to win another national title under head coach Tim Corbin and make it back-to-back national championships, a rare feat in this sport. Vanderbilt beat Virginia 5-1 in Game 1. It looked as though the Doors would dominate the Cavs again, but once again, they clearly didn't know this Virginia team and all that they had been through throughout the whole season. Virginia bounced back, playing incredible defense as they beat Vanderbilt 3-0 in Game 2, and then 4-2 in Game 3 to win their first ever national championship and become one of the most unlikely national champions in NCAA history. Keep this in mind. Virginia had to come from behind and had nothing easy the entire postseason, yet they still won it all. All 10 of their postseason wins had the go-ahead run scored in the 5th inning or later, meaning that every single game they were starting out behind and found a way to come back and win. And so this was an incredible story of not only an underdog winning the title, but a great sports story of resilience despite all odds. And finally, speaking of defying the odds, this last story is one of going from last to first. In 2022, Ole Miss was the 64th team out of 64 to be selected to the NCAA tournament. The Ole Miss Rebels would end up with a 14-16 record in SEC play and was in 5th place out of 7 in the SEC West Division. Ole Miss actually started out the regular season strong. In fact, they were ranked all the way up to number 1 in the country before getting swept by a great number 5 Tennessee team and falling to number 10 in the rankings. From there, they would win a series against Kentucky before losing 10-7 to Southern Miss, more on them later, and then get swept by unranked Alabama. They would then go on to lose a series to South Carolina and then lose a series to arch rival Mississippi State, who were both pretty bad that season. Then they would go on to lose a series to number 5 Arkansas. Fortunately for the Rebs, they would win 7 straight games, sweeping Missouri, beating number 14 Southern Miss in a rematch, more on them later, again, and sweeping rival number 17 LSU, but would lose their final series at home to number 6 Texas A&M. Then, Ole Miss would then go on to lose their only SEC tournament game against a mediocre Vanderbilt team. So, as a result of all of that, it is safe to say that the Ole Miss players were definitely sweating on the selection day. But due to their very strong start to the year and that good 7-game stretch late, the Rebs just barely made it to the NCAA tournament. There, they had to go further down south to Miami, where number 6 Miami was hosting their regional. From there, Ole Miss was the 3 seed in that regional and defeated Arizona 7-4 before matching up with the number 6 Miami Hurricanes. The Rebels would go on to beat the Canes in a thrilling 2-1 game before setting up a rematch with Arizona where they would annihilate the Wildcats 22-6 to go 3-0 and win the regional. Just like that, Ole Miss was moving on to the Super Regionals, but they would face a familiar foe, number 11, Southern Miss, who was previously mentioned already. Southern Miss and Ole Miss split the season series against each other in the 2 games that they played in the regular season, and now will be faced off in the Super Regional in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. This, at the time, would be the largest attendance ever for Southern Miss baseball games. However, unfortunately for the Golden Eagles fans, this one was no contest, as Ole Miss took Game 1 10-0, and then also won Game 2 5-0. Overall, dominating Southern Miss 15-0 to win those 2 games and advance to Omaha. Now heading into Omaha, it's important to note that this 2022 tournament was all around insane, and there's a lot of crazy Cinderella teams that made it into this field that I could talk about besides just Ole Miss, as Ole Miss would end up only facing one more ranked team the rest of the way. They would face off against number 14 Auburn, and the Rebels would beat the Tigers 5-1 before then matching up with Arkansas, who again, as mentioned earlier, Arkansas at one point was the number 5 team in the country, but they were slipping and sliding all over the place as well towards the end, and Ole Miss ended up beating the Hogs 13-5 to start out 2-0 in College World Series play. Again, the all-important 2-0 start. They would then lose to Arkansas in a rematch 3-2, which would set up the rubber match against their big-time rival. Ole Miss defeated the Hogs 2-0 to advance to the national championship, where in the national championship they would face off against another unlikely underdog and another unranked team in Oklahoma. Ole Miss and Oklahoma was one of the most unlikely pairings in the national championship ever. Both were going on insane Cinderella runs, but Ole Miss would beat the Sooners 10-3 in Game 1, which would set up the chance to win their first ever national championship, and they would do just that, taking down Oklahoma 4-2 in Game 2 and go from last all the way to first. This would be like if University of North Carolina in March Madness this past season, who was controversially the last team selected to that tournament, if they ended up going on a run and winning the whole March Madness national championship instead of Todd Golden's Florida Gators this past season. That's how crazy this Ole Miss victory was. Let me know which run you thought was the craziest, and if you're super excited for this year's College World Series here in 2025 in the comments section down below. Thank you so much for watching the College Sports Superfan.